In this final video, I'd like to speak on the idea of reconnecting with nature and the practice of what is called forest therapy. We often think of environmental actions as those that have direct effects on the physical environment. Sustainable activity requires that we do something or stop doing something, depending on its effects. However, our relation to climate change and the natural world is more than just what we do or do not do. It's very much about, I think, how we choose to be as people, as a part of this great set of connections of beings. How we construct the cosmos that we inhabit and the way we relate to all beings that we share our existence with. The reason why is a really simple one. It comes down to the concept of love. Love means seeing the world as the world truly is, rather than imposing our viewpoints on it. Here are two examples of viewpoints that we impose on the world. One is that the world is made out of material as opposed to beings, and that those materials are here for our free use and our benefit. The other is that we should be free to pursue the accumulation of these materials by whatever means that we deem appropriate. Existing, of course, within a system of laws and regulations, however, that system of laws and regulations largely being written by and for the benefit of those who do the most accumulating. The result of this is the objectification of our world. A forest ceases to be a living network of beings and becomes a resource, a collection of lumber to be cut, processed, and sold. We ignore the actual reality of the forest, that it is very much alive. Whether through ancient wisdom, modern science, or simply quiet observation of one's own experience, we cannot help but recognize that the forest is a living, breathing system of conscious beings. Even the trees themselves appear to communicate, cooperate, and feel something equivalent to pain when under duress. Modern neuroscience agrees that our conception of consciousness must now be expanded away from simply the human to include, at least in some gradated way, much of the living world. When we begin to recognize the autonomy, consciousness, and beingness of our fellow organisms on this planet, we are taking active steps at de-objectifying, decolonizing, and undoing the objectification imposed by industrial capitalism. When we learn to see our fellow beings for who rather than what they are, we open up ourselves to the experience of connection. What the psychoanalyst Martin Buber called the I-thou rather than the I-it relationship. Opening to the collective web of life on this planet is a really profoundly connective and also at times painful experience. This is really the two-sided nature of our capacity for empathy. But you shouldn't let it discourage you. The collective joy, as well as the grief and rage that such connective work can induce, must be transmuted into the loving energy that fuels wise action. All wise action comes from a place not of hurried desire, but from a careful kind of cultivated inner stillness. As the 20th century mystic Thomas Merton says on the nature of contemplation and action, a certain depth of disciplined experience is necessary ground for fruitful action. Without a more profound human understanding derived from exploration of the inner ground of our existence, love will tend to be superficial and deceptive. Merton tells us clearly that outer work begins with inner work, with an awakening. Nature provides us with the sort of location and slow time free from distraction in which we can carry out this kind of inner work. What environmentalist Joanna Macy calls the work that reconnects us, a practice that is foundational to what can be a great turning in the way we relate to the more than human world that we inhabit. In Japan, it is referred to as forest bathing, or taking in the healing power of nature through our five senses. Forest bathing and forest therapy in the past 6 years has slowly been working its way into Western consciousness as well. As a scientist and practitioner, I myself am very interested and very passionate about understanding how nature can heal us, both physically, emotionally, and spiritually, and how these practices can serve as work that reconnects us to our home. I love this work because it honors many ways of knowing the world. I'm able to use science to manipulate and measure different effects, use this evidence to then promote the need to protect and care for our natural spaces. I can also engage with others in this more than human world on a spiritual and experiential level, fostering meaning and healing that really transcends the material qualities of our lives. We know from this research that spending even 20 to 30 minutes a few times a week quietly in nature can reduce our stress, improve our memory and our attention, decrease our blood pressure, promote better sleep, and boost our immune system. Some clinicians are now using nature therapy to help treat attention deficit hyperactive disorder, anxiety, depression, and to facilitate meaningful experiences for people with disabilities, dementia, and those healing from serious illnesses. Nature therapy does this because it gives us a chance to get away, to foster a kind of childlike fascination, experience a varying myriad of stimulations that the natural world provides, and promotes both our physical as well as our interpersonal capabilities. You don't need really that much nature to engage in nature therapy. So if you live in a city or an urban setting and you feel like there's not a park nearby, go out and look. See that nature can occur in the most inopportune of places. Dandelions growing out of concrete, weeds growing in sides of buildings or gutters on roofs. All life finds a way to make things work. So part of engaging in nature therapy is being creative and open to the variety that nature has to offer us. You don't need to get so far away from humans that you don't hear a sound. We know that's very difficult in the world that we live in. There are very few quiet places left. There are very few untouched places left. But remember, we are part of this space. Everything we create is part of nature. So what we're doing is really finding a new way to relate to these experiences. Maybe you have a potted plant, a small park, your own backyard really can be as beneficial as a quiet woodland away from the noise of city traffic. What's most important is that you work with what you have. So what I want to introduce now are some different practices that you can try out on your own and elaborate on. And I'll share some materials with you as well that you can take with you to try and foster your own kind of forest therapy, nature therapy practices. In any practice, no matter what you do, one of the most important things is how you arrive to where you are. We too often never really arrive in places. We tend to show up, And we maintain some level of distraction until we move to another place, often thinking about what we have to do next or what we have to do next and so on. We then often find ourselves wondering later what we've been doing all day. Arrive. Turn off your phone completely. Don't worry, you can always turn it back on later. Bring your attention to your body, to your breathing. Notice if you feel active or relaxed. Spend a few minutes breathing in and out slowly, following your breath as it moves in with each inhale and out with each exhale. Let yourself settle into a sense of your whole person in the present moment. Once you feel you've slowed down a bit and arrived in this location, bring your attention to your senses. In a short forest therapy practice, you can spend maybe 5 minutes with each sense. In most forest therapy encounters, we invite participants to spend 1 to 2 hours connecting with their inner and outer space through their senses. Start by listening. Notice how when you listen, that sometimes you want to label, categorize, and judge the sounds that you hear. This is a pleasant sound, that is not. Try and let go of those judgments and simply listen. If there are birds, spend some time listening to their language. When we listen to birds intently, we can often notice how truly amazing and complex their language actually is. Sometimes sonorous, sometimes dissonant to our ears. Any time spent listening to birds makes us realize how rich their inner consciousness and life must be. You don't need to concern yourself with identifying or naming the birds. Just listen to them. Listen like you want to know this other being, as opposed to trying to categorize. Spend some time maybe each day around your home listening to different bird songs. See if you can find 3, 4, or 5 that you hear consistently. Let yourself grow familiar with them. Let yourself grow to know them, and then maybe even name them. Not necessarily with the names of the birds themselves, but maybe just with a name, any name that you feel like offering up for them, whatever name perhaps their voice calls out for. Try working with your sense of touch. Gently feel plants or a handful of the earth. Run your hands along the bark of a tree. Place it in the water. If you're indoors, try touching different surfaces. Notice the sensation of contact that these materials provide you with. It's easy to forget that our built environment is made up of natural objects. The wood in our tables, the metal in other materials, the carpet that we see, may be far from its original natural state. But this sort of watching, awareness, and opening gives us a chance to explore that chain of connection that we share with those objects. Only if we are willing to open our souls and our attention to them. Try connecting with aromas. Invite yourself to breathe in the heady scent of flowers. Or cup a handful of earth and bring it to your nose. Smell the aroma of decay, the microorganisms feeding and changing this organic matter, breaking it down from plants into soils that will then feed back into the system. Consider the cyclical nature of this process. Make a cup of tea and spend some time enjoying the aroma. Take a walk and follow your nose towards different scents that surround you, pleasant and unpleasant. Connecting with nature through our senses is one way to ground ourselves in the present moment. It takes us out of our thinking and analytic mind, and it invites us to connect directly with the more than human world. When we do this sort of work, we start to notice qualities of that world that we otherwise would likely miss. We start to reconnect ourselves to the web of being that surrounds us. We recognize the complexity and the cyclical nature of this being. One of my favorite nature therapy activities is called the sit spot. A sit spot is a single place in nature that you return to on a regular basis over and over again to practice an opening of your awareness. Ideally, a sit spot should be in nature, somewhat private, maybe quiet, and easy to access. This could be a space in your yard or a park. If you can't access an outdoor space, again, you can create your own in your own home with some plants. The practice of sit spot means you return to this space regularly, over and over again. Maybe every day for 20 minutes or more if possible. Sit down, arrive, and observe. Like I mentioned before, open your senses to this place and the beings that you're sharing it with. After a few months, you'll notice that you start to establish a new kind of familiarity with the place. What is happening is a change in your sense of time and of space. By repeatedly returning and opening ourselves, we start to form new kinds of topographies of place. We begin to become familiar with the movement of life rather than the movement of time. We come in contact with and learn to listen for the different sounds a tree makes in the breeze when it has leaves and when it does not. When the breeze is soft or it's a strong wind. We see the changing activities of the creatures around us with the seasons, insects, small mammals. The great gift of the sit spot is that it grounds and connects us. We so often move through spaces as opposed to in them. By being in a space, we come to recognize that we've always been a part of the great chain of being. We're not discovering something new, but rediscovering something that our human ancestors experienced implicitly because they lived so close to the earth. Mother Earth, Father Sky, Brother Bird, and so on. That we are not on this planet, but part of this planet, part of a great family, a council of all beings. If we look at other beings honestly, as beings of intrinsic value, it undermines any attempt at objectification. Rather than objects to hold, the natural world around us becomes subjects to behold. Subjects who are worthy of our love and our respect. Worthy of fighting for, as we would for the safety and sanctity of our own families. The work that reconnects creates love, and it is through that love that we connect with the world, and we realize our purpose and find our meaning in the work that we know we must do. Not necessarily just to save ourselves or even to save ourselves, but to save the very planet and the life that inhabits it. Thanks.